there's gotta be a way to do this better. So many people don't like going. So why are we all doing it the same way? And so that's where I put my psychology hat on and realized it's really the sensory part of things that people dislike. So the typical dental experience is negative in almost every sensory aspect. So there's the sounds, there's the smells, there's seeing instruments, there's that feeling of vulnerability. Like the person's sensory system is in fight or flight. That's when I realized my career as a school psychologist is why we can use the strategies and bring them into dentistry. It just changes their whole perspective on receiving care in the dental chair.
Welcome to the 16th episode of the Story Project podcast. I'm your host, Joanna Scott, and I'm so excited for this conversation with a new friend of mine, Jessica Martin. Before I welcome my guest, I want to tell you a little bit about her. Jessica Martin is the owner of Martin Management Consulting and the co-owner of Martin Dental, a successful dental spa in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Jessica is a licensed school psychologist and helps medical professionals understand why patients feel anxious or fear at the dentist and other medical appointments. She has strategies for medical professionals to remove some of the most common barriers to dental care. She loves sharing ways to make the experience positive for every patient. Can't wait to dive into that. And she has also been involved in leadership positions for 2 local networking organizations for the past 8 years. You have assisted 90 plus business professionals to thrive and be more successful, which sounds like a lot. Wow. Welcome to the Story Project podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you also for flying all the way to Columbus, Ohio.
Yes.
And it was quite a journey because you finally got to your hotel last night at
2 a.m.
2 a.m.
Yes.
And look how beautiful she looks.
Wow.
It's one of the reasons.
Good makeup.
Well, thank you for coming and just trusting us to capture custom photography and video for you. Our team is having a blast with you so far, and we can't wait to show you the finished product. So,
yes, I'm super excited to be here.
I always like to begin with how we met, which I believe the first time we connected and talked was at the Do Retreat last year with, of course, Ann Duffy. And isn't she extraordinary?
She's amazing, yes.
Yeah. I mean, anyone that hangs out with her, you just feel like larger than life, and you feel included and loved and warm.
Yeah, it was literally the best dental conference, or really conference in general, I've ever been to. And I knew nobody going into it, and I left feeling like I had a bunch of new friends. So it was super great.
Completely. Okay, so I want to dive into just a few kind of icebreaker rapid fire questions, and you can give me, just some brief answers and responses. So what has been your favorite family vacation that you guys have done?
Yeah, I love taking the family to Mexico. We just love to get away in the winter, go somewhere warm and just relax. My kids would probably say Disney because they loved all the rides and, just the cool stuff you can see there. And they do such a good job at Disney, but that's really not my vibe. But it was really fun, and it was magical to see them get excited and whatnot too.
Yeah, that's awesome. My kids also love Disney, but they are also 13 and 17, and we are just done. Yes. We're like, no more Disney. Yes. We've been there multiple times, and it's funny how even when they get older, they still really are entertained, and there's
something for everyone.
There
right?
is. There really is something for everyone. Okay. Why do you need to wear an eye mask even in a really dark room?
Yes. So I love that we connect on this,
yes.
or we share this.
I also wear an eye mask.
Sorry if I outed you there. I don't remember when I started wearing an eye mask, but I've always had sleep issues, or, I have trouble sleeping,
yes.
Sometimes trouble falling asleep, sometimes trouble staying asleep. So I have this whole sleep hygiene thing I do, and it's part of it. So even when it's a super dark room, I need to have that mask on. It just helps me feel, I guess, secure. And if there is any light or any interruption, I don't see it. It doesn't bother me. So I just like that comfort feeling of it being there. So it's kind of silly, but I always wear one.
Not silly at all. I actually would relate it to, like, if you're getting a facial and sometimes they'll put something weighted over your eyes, you immediately, I feel the stress melt off of me, so I would compare it to that.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. Okay, last one. Can you share your top 5 strengths from the Clifton strengths?
Yes. Maximizer, arranger, is a responsibility, I think, one of them, achiever, and communicator.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Wow. That makes so much sense now that I'm getting to know you better, especially like your lead strength, maximizer.
Yeah.
because you really like to get things.
Well, and it was
done.
interesting before I did the Strengths Finders, I always kind of thought of myself as a little bit critical. Like I'd go into something and be like, oh, I could think of ways it could be better.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would get down on myself about that. And then once I realized like, no, that's actually my gift, is to be able to identify those little things that we can tweak to make it better.
Yes.
And I had the word for it. It helped me step into it more. So I thought it was really powerful.
I love that. The Clifton Strengths are completely affirming. And I think they just help you lean into who you truly are.
Right.
And your gift to the world and everything you bring. So definitely. Well, before we get into the dentistry side of who you are, I want to go back a bit. I know that family is really important to you, and you're a mama, so I'd love to hear, you have 2 young children. So
Yes.
what are their names and ages?
Yeah, so Adriana is 11.
What a pretty name.
Oh, thank you. And my son Bennett is 7.
Okay, these
Yeah.
are both fantastic names.
Oh, thank you.
I'm partial to A names. My daughter's Aaliyah,
Oh,
so I
cute.
love, that's amazing.
Yeah.
When preparing for this interview, I always send every guest some questions so that I can, kind of really dive into like authentic conversations and that people can connect with. One thing you mentioned that stood out to me was your journey with IVF to have your children. And I have dealt with infertility with both of my children for years and years. And so I immediately connected with that subject. So take a moment and tell us what led you to do IVF not once, but twice, and just a little bit about that story.
Yeah, well, of course, I was ready probably like 2 years before my husband was to start our family. And so, of course, we got another dog and, tried to fill the gap with that. And then so by the time we were ready, we were both ready. I just expected it to happen really quickly. We didn't have family history of fertility issues. So when it didn't, it was pretty devastating. We went through a couple of years of trying all these different, medications and different, like IUI is a less invasive step that you would take to get there. And then, it came down to that we had to try IVF because we weren't being successful in other ways. And so it was super scary at the time. This was about 12 years ago now. And I didn't know anybody that had gone through it. So, and I hate getting my blood drawn. I hate needles. So I was like, no.
Yeah.
But, you do amazing things when you have to. And, I look back now and I'm like, how did I get through all of that? Like, it was a lot. But I wanted a family and, it was the way to get there. And I was lucky. I got pregnant with my daughter on our first fresh cycle. So that was great. And that gave me like hope that this could work and be great for us. She was quite a handful. So actually we didn't know if we were going to continue because it wasn't just like, oh, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
It was very emotional. There's costs to it. There's just a lot of things to think about when you're having to go to those measures to have kids. So we waited for a few years and then I just felt like our family wasn't quite complete. So we tried another time. We had some frozen embryos, luckily, so I didn't have to go through another fresh cycle, which was great, less hard on my body. And then that cycle did not take. So then I was like, oh my gosh, maybe that's a sign. We shouldn't have another child. Yeah. My husband and I are both only children. So we were like, well, maybe we're just meant to have an only. Yeah. So we waited and I don't remember, maybe 6 months, 8 months later, I was like, no, I just still feel like I'm going to try again. Yeah. So we tried a third time and then we got pregnant with our son. So it was quite the journey. And I forget now, they're older. And so I kind of forget sometimes what we went through to have them. But I do think it made me a better mom. It makes me more patient. I really, really wanted them. And so it's cool that I can tell them like, this is how hard we had to work to get you. And it was funny when my daughter was little, she saw me go through my cycle to have my son. She was like, 2, 3 years old, and she thought that's how everybody had to have babies. And she was like, I don't know if I want to ever have babies with all the shots and all the things. So I had to, of course, tell her that that isn't how everyone has to do it. But
this is what your mama did to have you.
Yeah.
So that's really special. And that has to make her feel special too.
Yes, for sure. And I really love sharing our journey with others because I think it's sometimes people feel weird about talking about it or feel shame in some way, like their body didn't work right. And I just think it's important to be able to share our journeys and help one another. And so in the back of my mind, I'd like to start an infertility support group in our community because there isn't anything like that.
Oh, definitely.
And I think that would be just a huge asset for people going through it at the time to just have people to talk to.
Absolutely.
So it's on the back. It's in there somewhere. I'll find it.
I love that because I think that so many moms, so many women that are longing to be mothers, they often feel very isolated.
Yes.
I mean, and like, where do I go? Who do I talk to? And, every time Mother's Day rolls around, it's just that reminder that they're not a mom.
Well, and for most people that are struggling, it's like there's this timing thing, right? Like a lot of your friends are getting married at the same time, and then everyone's starting to have kids at the same time. I mean, typically. So I remember when we were going through it, I mean, it was pregnancy announcement one after another weekly. I'd see things online about people getting pregnant. It was so frustrating. And so like I felt like I wasn't myself because I was angry. And I'm like, I'm not an angry person, and I want to be happy for people. But it was just like, I didn't want to hear about it. So to have other people to talk to be like, yeah, this sucks and this is hard for me, when everyone else around you is getting what you want is helpful, I think.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I mentioned it will be Mother's Day actually coming up here in May in a couple months. What would you say to all the women who are currently struggling with infertility and just that despair and longing over wanting to be a mother? Any words of like encouragement to them? Yeah,
I mean, I think I would say that know that there's a way, right? Like whether you have to save and you don't have the money to do it right now, or you end up adopting and it's not your biological child, whatever ends up needing to happen, there is a way to do it. And so sometimes you have to think outside of the box you thought, or think about it in a different way than you thought you would have to make it happen, but it's so worth it. So to kind of open up the ideas of how to make it happen and what are the options.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm gathering you have more of a bias for action.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Picking up on those vibes with you, Jessica.
Well, yes. And I sometimes think back, like, if we just waited, maybe it would have happened naturally. I sometimes think that because we got that diagnosis at a year that you're infertile. After a year of trying, you're infertile. And so we started to take all the steps because that's who I am. I research, I take action. And so at the end of that second year, we were pregnant with my daughter. I made it happen. Wow. So maybe if I'd waited and, calmed down, which I hate it when people say stuff like that, but maybe it would have happened. But then I also think there's 4 years between my kids and we didn't prevent it all. So it's like, if the opportunity to have it happen naturally would have happened, it would have. Like didn't even know if I wanted a second at that time. Right. So we weren't trying, we weren't preventing. It probably would have just happened. So I'm glad I took action. Yeah. I think, everyone's different. You have to kind of know yourself. And my mental health was starting to struggle. And so it was like, we actually, my husband probably doesn't want me to say this out loud on air or whatever, but, we didn't have the money at the time. We were just starting out, when
IVF is so expensive.
It's so expensive. Yeah. And we didn't have a lot. We had just bought our dental practice. And so we scraped up money. We borrowed from the business a little bit.
An investment. Yeah.
We were just like, well, he's like, we need to make this happen or you're going to go bonkers. So you just have to know yourself. And if you're able to, play it out and wait longer, I mean, so be it. But I definitely took action and made it happen. So
good for you.
And sometimes when they're difficult and both of my kids are very spirited and strong-willed, and I'm like, we forced this to happen. Like, was this meant to be? Like, they're both little forces of nature. Like, they're going to change the world. And I sometimes wonder, like, that's because we really, made that happen. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. Well, let's move into the dentistry, side of who you are and what you do. You are a licensed psychologist, which I find fascinating, a dental practice owner, and also have your consulting company called Martin Management. I want to save time to chat about how you help practices, but can you take a minute and just tell, I'm just interested in how you got, why you decided to go into psychology first.
Oh, I think I was always, I'm an only child, so I was that kid that at holidays with extended family and cousins and everything, that I would find myself sitting at the adult table, like listening into their conversations and just always fascinated by people and relationships and just the dynamics of people. And I've always found helping people to be really rewarding. So initially I thought I would be like a clinical psychologist. I've always loved children, so looked into those avenues. And then school psychology actually I wanted to be a lawyer. I went to college to be a lawyer.
Oh, okay.
And that I just found the study to be very boring. And so I was like, okay, I love people. I feel like I understand people pretty easily. I have some intuition there. So let's combine this. And school psychology is actually kind of a combination of law and psychology. So oddly enough, it sort of fit both areas of interest. And I did enjoy my work with kids as well. Like I look back on that time too and find that I had so much fulfillment there too. There were just extenuating circumstances, which we'll get into on how I got into dentistry.
Yeah, that's awesome. One last question on the psychology aspect, but being a licensed psychologist, does that help you with your personal and professional relational dynamics?
I mean, I think so.
I think so too. You're so fun to talk to and hang out with.
No, I just think understanding people can help you in anything you're doing, whether it's sales or counseling or just being a human, right? Like having perspective on other people and empathy and compassion, all those qualities can help you in any avenue. And I look back at my career as a school psychologist and what I was doing then, and I was really consulting like parents and teachers, and I was kind of doing what I'm doing now, just in a different realm, if that makes sense. It's weird how, you see things play out and you realize like, how does this all make sense? But it really does. All those skills that you build along the way bring you to this present moment.
I think if I were a licensed psychologist, I would probably, I don't know, like diagnose my husband.
Well, if he was here.
Like if you're in let's say a heated argument or just conversation, then you're like, oh, what's happening right now is called this.
Oh, I do that. I used to do that more. And then I realized it really shut him down because he was like, I can't win. Like, you're always going to be right, because you have all this education.
Right.
And with parenting too, that's been tricky for us because we have very different parenting styles. And I have this background in child development and psychology with, working with kids. And so like my way of doing it is the right way, right? Like I know these things now. I'm just kidding. It's just, I'm like, have you read books on this? Had you, so it's actually caused conflict because I feel like I'm an expert in that realm, and I am to a degree. Of course, we all have things to learn, and there's certain parts of his style that are good that our kids do need, but
of course.
Yeah, it can get me in trouble if I'm not careful with it.
That's so funny. I would get in huge trouble.
He's my greatest work. No, I'm just kidding. But really, like dentists, they have depression rates that are higher, and it's a tough it's a tough job. And so, I always think he's really lucky to be married to a school psychologist.
Absolutely. He can lean on you, right? Yes, completely. Well, I'd love to hear how you help dental practice owners and their teams. So tell us the heart and soul behind Martin Management and how you help, improve the patient experience. And I know that the practice that you guys owned, it's Martin's Dental Spa.
We just say it's just called Martin Dental.
Martin Dental,
brand and market as a dental spa.
Got it. Okay. So tell us the heart and soul behind what you do and how all this happened.
Yeah, so I had no intention of working in dentistry, had no intention of working with my husband. I was doing my own thing in the school psychology realm, and he came home on a Thursday and said, I need you to come in on Monday and take over the front office and run the practice for a few months until we find a replacement. I have had 2 people quitting at the same time. And I was just like, what? So I still don't know the tooth numbers. Like I literally just went in there.
I don't either.
Okay, good. Yes. Do you need to?
Yeah,
if we're not drilling, it's fine.
Right.
He needs to know them.
Yes.
But I never expected that, but it was our livelihood. So I went in and figured it all out. And at the end of all of that, when things stabilized, I realized that my background had a lot that could lend itself to dentistry. And he actually was like, if you're willing to stay and help me grow the business and run the business, I would love to have you do that. And I'm like, I kind of like this too. I was staying home with our daughter at the time. So I was going from stay-at-home mom mode into that. But I was still working as a school psychologist, but very part-time. So it was kind of the right timing for us to kind of join forces. And we needed to grow the practice. So I just was like, there's got to be a way to do this better. So many people don't like going. I hear these stories all the time. So why are we all doing it the same way? And so that's where I put my psychology hat on and realized it's really the sensory part of things that people dislike. So the typical dental experience is negative in almost every sensory aspect. So there's the sounds, there's the smells, there's seeing instruments, there's that feeling of vulnerability. Like the person's sensory system is in fight or flight, most people. And so that's why they're just like, I don't like this. I don't really know why. Yeah. And some people have had significant dental trauma too. So you pair that with negative sensory and you've got a hot mess there. So that's when I realized my career as a school psychologist is why we can use the strategies and bring them into dentistry, because schools have sensory rooms for kids that need less sensory or or more sensory. And so that's the idea. What I teach teams is how to either add positive sensory or remove negative sensory. And so that helps the body to calm down and relax and go, oh, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And it just changes the whole experience, their whole perspective on receiving care in the dental chair. And that's where a lot of, I think, dental offices miss the beat, is they think, well, we have a really pretty office and we have a great team and we do it really gently and we get to know our patients, and that's great. I mean, everybody should do that. But what I teach that's different is really that sensory component, and teaching the team to understand sensory so that even when the patient doesn't know what they need, the team can say, I see that you're sweating. Let me suggest this or whatever. So that's kind of, that's the start of what I do. Is really, everything I do is geared from the patient experience. So if I'm helping the front office with their systems, that's been a need that's arisen as I've gotten the consulting business going. I teach them the systems that work efficiently and profitably for the practice, but also how that patient's going to feel in receiving that system or interacting with that system. So if it's collecting money, for example, how are you asking for the money? When are you asking? What does that discussion look like? Those things matter in how the patient feels about the practice. And every interaction that a team has with a patient can either keep a patient or can lose a patient. And so that's where I love to work with teams to create this whole flow from the very beginning of that relationship through the actual dental experience, through that checkout process, to really make it incredible for the patient and make them leave and go, that was the best dental office I've ever been to.
Right.
That's super rewarding.
So I'm sure you're also coaching in a heightened sense of observation and awareness with patients, not only just obviously the clinicians and practice owners, but the whole team. The whole team.
I mean, some people naturally have some of those skills where they can just tell how someone's feeling, and then some people are completely oblivious.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't want to peg doctors in a hole, but they're focusing on dentistry, and they should be. That's what they're doing.
Yes.
But they're often the ones that aren't being able to pick up on those cues, and so the team has to really be strong in those areas to be able to compensate for some of that, so the dentist can come in and truly just do a great crown or filling or whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah. I love that. So what changes have your clients experienced working with you? Yeah,
I think the changes have been, there's monetary parts of it, right? So I track their production from before we work together and then after we work together, because I want to make sure that they're receiving a return on their investment. And everyone increases substantially, which is awesome.
Not surprised.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're talking an average of $1,000 a day in production increase difference, or $2,000. I'm oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And those are with systems tweaks mostly, right? So definitely there's profitability there, but practice growth is a huge part of it, because if you want to continue to do quality dentistry and attract the people that are going to value what you're doing, you need to have a differentiating factor. You have to do it different than the dentist down the street, or if you change prices or you get out of network, the loyalty is hard to keep if you're not markedly different.
Yeah.
So when we can really create an atmosphere that a patient's I can go nowhere else. I am now spoiled by what you've done for me.
Yes.
You have a patient for life, especially someone that's anxious. If you can help them not have anxious feelings about receiving dental care, they're never going to leave. They are going to, and the team can feel really fulfilled and proud that they can help people in that way too. So, I mean, I think there's so many different ways that my clients feel success.
Yeah.
But I think most clinicians go into this field because they want to help people, and this allows them to help more people. It allows them to, have people get the care that they need. It's probably super frustrating as a dentist to diagnose something and then have the patient not follow through with it because maybe it's cost, maybe it's fear, whatever the reason.
Yeah.
And they're oh my gosh, I know that they're struggling. They have an abscess, they're not willing to do it.
Right.
Well, if we can figure out how to get into their psyche and really help them through that process and make it a great experience, they can get that care that they need, and that's super rewarding for doctors.
There was something you said about, patients for life, and just made me think of creating raving fans.
Yes.
There's a restaurant entrepreneur in Columbus who owns dozens of incredible restaurants, Cameron Mitchell. He wrote a book, let's see, yes is the answer, what is the question? But in the book, he talks, throughout it, it's a thread between creating raving fans out of your team, but also your customers. And so I just thought of that when you said, really patients for life. I'm like, that's exactly what you're doing. If they're raving fans, they would never consider going anywhere else.
Exactly. And they help you grow the practice in that way. They're going to refer their friends and family in because they can't stop talking about it, or they just have such care for your team and your office and what you do. So that can reduce marketing costs as well. So there's a lot of ways it can affect the bottom line in a positive way.
Yes.
And the other thing that's really interesting, and my husband's the only one to report this, so it's probably not statistically significant, but we've had time to really think through how this has impacted our practice for a longer length of time because we've been doing it the longest. And he's actually indicated that dentistry is easier for him because when a patient is tense and closed off because they're anxious or whatever, their body is not really allowing them to feel expansive. And so he has a harder time getting the block in the right place. They're just, they can't open as wide.
Yeah.
And so
they're
when
tight and tense and clenched up. Yeah.
When their body's calm, he can get that block where he needs to. And it's like their body's more ready to receive the care.
Right.
So he's like, I can get in there quicker and do what I need to do more perfectly than if they were just grinning and bearing it.
So complimentary. Yeah, that's amazing. So what does the future look like for Jessica Martin? Like, tell us what you envision right now. What feels exciting to you?
Yeah, I mean, I love working with teams. I love being on site with teams and just seeing them in action with patients and, reinforcing the things they're doing really great and then also giving them little tweaks to do it better. It's hard for me to say because I never expected to be here, right? Like, if you'd asked me 10 years ago what I would be doing, I would say, oh, I'm a school psychologist. I'm a director of special education. I would be going down that path because that was what my plan was. And I'm pretty type A, so I followed the plan. But as I've gotten older, I've realized, I need to allow myself to be drawn into the things that light me up and that give me inspiration. And I'm following my intuition more. And I don't know where that's going to lead, to be totally honest. I'm just going to let this journey take me where it needs to take me. And I feel like a conduit kind of for it. Yeah. I'm not even super religious, but that's what I feel. Right. And, but I also think there's something burning that this concept that I've brought to dentistry could be brought to other areas of healthcare. There's, different appointments that we all dread. Gynecology, getting your pap smear done, or breast health, or going in for a colonoscopy. There are things that people, just full on dread. And I feel like maybe part of this big vision is to get into bigger healthcare and make those things better because it doesn't take much to make it better. And I think that's what providers don't realize. We're not like buying a $400,000 piece of equipment to help people through this. It's the little details that really can make the experience different.
That's awesome. I love that. So before we go, Jessica, what are just a few last words of encouragement you can share with this audience of dental professionals that are listening to this episode?
Yeah, I would say, we've had a tough run in dentistry for the last few years with COVID and everything else, all the challenges with staffing. I would say, find the things that drew you into the profession and that really give you inspiration and passion and try to feed that as much as possible. It's so easy to get burnt out right now, especially in this field. And so find that burn against however it works for you, whether it's CE or bringing in a coach, or if you need help to get that inspiration back, that's okay. That's great. We all need people around us to support us and lift us up. But find it and make sure that you're, using all the gifts that you've been given to help dentistry be better. Because I think it takes a lot of us out there to do what we do and use our gifts to make a huge impact on the world and on dentistry.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. I cannot thank you enough for just taking the time to be my guest today.
Thank you.
It was so fun to talk with you and get to hear your story and what you're doing for dentistry. If people want to follow you and stay in touch, what is the best place to do that?
Yes, well, I do have a Facebook page. It's Martin Management LLC. I also am on LinkedIn. I have a website as well. So, and it's still just me. Like, I do all the consulting. I have an assistant help me with things, but I respond to my own emails, and I love to be fully present with the people that I'm working with. So any way that anyone wants to reach out, I'm happy to chat.
They're going to get a full human touch if they work with you, right?
It's the experience.
I love
that.
Right? Yeah, I love that so much. Well, thank you again for being with us and also with our team. Our team loves you, and I love this amazing tribe of people in dentistry willing to share their stories. Let's be fearless together this week, Story Project podcast listeners. And that's it. That's a wrap.